Donald Trump says he's committed to finding a peace deal for Israel and the Palestinians. But how does the U.S. president plan to solve such a complicated conflict and succeed where so many others have failed? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Richelle Carey. Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have touted a strong friendship since well before Trump was elected U.S. president. This trip to the Middle East could be seen as showcasing that relationship. Trump's the first U.S. president to visit the Western Wall while in office. That sparked controversy as it's a Jewish holy site on disputed territory. Over 2 days, the two leaders spent time together at a number of engagements. They also discussed Iran. Netanyahu says he feels reassured with Trump in the White House.
I have no doubt that as we work together, you and I, the alliance between our countries will grow ever stronger. I want you to know how much we appreciate the change in American policy on Iran, which you enunciated so clearly just an hour ago. It won't be simple, but for the first time in many years, and Mr. President, for the first time in my lifetime, I see a real hope for change. The Arab leaders who you met yesterday could help change the atmosphere, and they could help create the conditions for a realistic peace.
Trump also headed to Bethlehem to meet with the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas. Their talks centered on the Israel-Palestine Peace Process. Trump has repeatedly said he hopes to reopen negotiations, and he mentioned that again on Tuesday.
I am committed to trying to achieve a peace agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and I intend to do everything I can to help them achieve that goal. President Abbas assures me he is ready to work toward that goal in good faith, and Prime Minister Netanyahu has promised the same. I look forward to working with these leaders toward a lasting peace. I also firmly believe that if Israel and the Palestinians can make peace, it will begin a process of peace all throughout the Middle East, and that would be an amazing accomplishment.
But Abbas says the Israeli occupation continues to be the main obstacle to peace.
We are keen to keep dialogue open with our Israeli neighbors from all walks of life in order to boost confidence and create a genuine peace opportunity. Our fundamental problem is with the occupation and settlements and the failure of Israel to recognize the state of Palestine in the same way we recognize it. This undermines the realization of the two-state solution. The problem is not between us and Judaism, it is between us and the occupation.
On this trip, Trump called the Israel-Palestine peace process one of the toughest deals of all. There have been decades of fruitless negotiations. The Oslo Agreement, signed in 1993, was meant to set up a transitional period leading to a two-state solution, but the deal was only partially implemented. There were the Camp David talks in 2000 between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. Those talks failed, and what followed was the Second Intifada. Arab countries, led by Saudi Arabia, presented their own peace plan at a summit in Beirut 2 years later, but it neglected to address many of the main controversial issues. In 2003, the U.S., Russia, EU, and the UN, known as the Quartet, introduced what they called a roadmap to peace. Its timetable called for a final agreement to be reached by 2005, which never happened. And U.S. President Barack Obama tried and failed to negotiate a deal between Israel and Palestine in 2009 and again in 2013. Joining me now are our guests from Tel Aviv, Yossni Beilin, the former Israeli negotiator at the Oslo Peace Accords. From Ramallah, Majed Bamya, a Palestinian diplomat. And in Jerusalem, Nathan Thrall from the International Crisis Group. Nathan is also author of the book, The Only Language They Understand, Forcing Compromise in Israel and Palestine. And welcome to all of you. President Donald Trump said that this is the toughest deal of all. But he also said a few weeks ago, when speaking of this attempt at peace. He says it is something that I think is, frankly, maybe not as difficult as people have thought over the years. Okay, so those seem to be two conflicting thoughts. I want this question to go to all of you. Yossi, what is your thinking on what Donald Trump's mindset is going into this when he seems to be having a mixed message on the difficulty of this?
Well, I'm not trying to enter the president's mindset. This is too much for me. But what I can say is that I'm very happy that about this surprise. I mean, in a way, it is a surprise that Donald Trump, of all people, is trying to revive the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. He put it again on the agenda. He explained to Mr. Netanyahu, to Prime Minister Netanyahu, that the efforts to have peace with the Arab states to somehow bypass the Palestinian problem is not possible. He told him that President Abu Mazen, President Abbas, is a partner that nobody can ignore. And if you accumulate all these components, it's good news. Whether it is difficult or easy, maybe he sees it now as a more difficult challenge than before, but I'm very happy that he doesn't listen too much to the experts of the past who tell him don't even try to enter this maze, and that he put it as a very big challenge for himself and one of the most important things on his agenda. And if this is the case, I'm sure that the Americans have their own ways to convince both sides to progress towards an agreement.
Majed, I'd like your thoughts as well when President Trump said, I think, frankly, maybe it's not as difficult as people have thought over the years.
Well, you know, the elements for an agreement are clear. It's a two-state solution based on 67 borders. You need to roll back the occupation to end it, to achieve freedom. We hope that that clarity will also be clear in the statements of President Trump in the future. So in that sense, there is a chance for peace once you see that, and the opportunities are clear as well. The Arab Peace Initiative, once the occupation ends, offer the possibility of regional peace, and that was highlighted by President Trump. However, what Netanyahu is hoping for, which is having occupation and peace at the same time, and occupation and normalization with the Arab world at the same time, is a non-starter. It's not possible. It's either or. You need to end occupation to have these. And when Netanyahu says that for the first time in his lifetime he sees a chance for change, that means that he needs to change for us to have a chance at peace.
Nathan, your thoughts? Do you think that President Trump is being optimistic or naive?
Well, I think it very much depends on what kind of an approach he takes. If, as he's promised, that he's not going to impose a solution, which is coded language for not pressuring the parties, then I think he'll find that the deal is extraordinarily difficult and that he won't have any more success than his predecessors. He keeps repeating over and over again, the administration does, that they won't impose a solution, and even the language that they use to describe their own role is that of a mere facilitator, not even a mediator. So if their notion is that they're going to just put the parties in a room, apply very little pressure, and just hope that they both want peace, they're going to fail. Now, the real question is whether Trump is truly different than previous American presidents, and that's what makes some of the parties, the Israelis, particularly frightened, and that's what gives Palestinians some hope. The possibility that perhaps Trump is capable of acting differently than his predecessors and actually changing the circumstances for the parties such that it makes sense for them to go for an agreement, and that the consequences of not going for an agreement are worse.
I think it's probably fair to say he's probably one of the most unique presidents in U.S. history. And in one way that he's certainly different than his predecessors is he is a businessman. Yossi, let me put this question to you. Do you think his background in business has any value when it comes to a process like this?
Well, I don't know objectively whether the business background is going to help him. What is important is that he thinks so. And that strengthened his feeling that it's okay for him to be involved and to make out of it a very important issue. Now, I agree with Nathan that it is very difficult to proceed without any kind of imposition. But the question is, how do you define imposing a solution? It is not that the Americans will tell both sides, you will have to do A, B, C, and if not, I'm leaving you. It is much more delicate, and the American administration, if it decides that it is a very high priority, has its ways to tell the parties that it is very important to it that A, B, and C will be implemented even without imposing it. So when I'm listening to Mr. Trump and I hear what he is saying about what is needed to do, my conclusion is the following one. Netanyahu tried to convince Trump that the most important thing is to fight Iran. He succeeded. Trump understands, or says so, that Iran is the enemy and we have to
Yossi,
prepare ourselves a coalition against it.
Yossi, if I could stop you for just a moment.
Netanyahu thought, I must again...
If I could stop you, though, when it comes to Iran, Donald Trump has been very tough on what he...
One very important issue. What I'm saying is Netanyahu failed in the following thing. In order for Trump to have this coalition against Iran, he needs the Israeli-Palestinian Peace Treaty because he understands that without it, it won't be possible to have such a coalition. And here is the point. He is coming to Jerusalem and says, okay, I don't have the procedure, I don't have the content yet. What I know is that you cannot run away from the efforts to make peace. And in order to make peace, you will have to compromise. This is a very important message, and I'm not sure whether this was exactly what Netanyahu expected.
So, yes, what happens? Donald Trump has talked very tough on Iran, but so far he really hasn't done anything to reimpose sanctions. What happens if he never follows through on that?
Well, I believe that he will try to meet his own challenge. And what is happening right now on the ground is a very intensive work of his advisors to go between, to talk in depth to both sides, to understand what can the sides do and to push the envelope. I believe that eventually they will find out that to go for a permanent agreement now with Netanyahu, who is ideologically not ready to pay the price for peace that we all know, and on the other hand with Abu Mazen, who cannot deliver Gaza or the support of Hamas, will bring us to a kind of a crisis. And that is why the main way to now deal with the problem is to go back to the roadmap of 2003 that you mentioned before, to the second stage of the roadmap, to a Palestinian state in provisional borders, while providing both sides with a vision and with a timetable.
Majed, Benjamin Netanyahu basically feels that the regional issues, dealing with Iran, is the priority, and the Palestinians is basically secondary. And Donald Trump seems to have tried to give the message that all of that is intertwined. That doesn't seem to me that they're on the same page when it comes to something like that.
I think divergent tactics will not work. There is a priority given to the end of the Israeli occupation and to Israeli-Palestinian peace. This is an important factor of stability. That's the message that President Trump heard from many Arab leaders, and he has recorded that message and he has conveyed it as well. So there's no escaping. The question is now they're going to be tested. Let us test both parties and their willingness, and I assure you that President Abbas can deliver on peace. Try him, give him a decent agreement based on UN resolutions, international law, based on the terms of reference of the peace process, and then let's see if he's able to deliver. The reality is that Netanyahu is not ready to engage. He's not ready to speak of 67 borders. He's not ready to end the illegal annexation of East Jerusalem. He's not ready to end military occupation of our land. And so the idea is not to escape towards new interim solutions that allows us to accommodate and try and coexist with the occupation. We are entitled to freedom, and we want the end of this occupation. 25 years of processes is long enough, and we have seen the process eat peace instead of delivering peace. And so we are clear, we want a final status agreement as soon as possible, and we hope that that is what peace efforts will deliver to us, so we can finally live in freedom and dignity. When President Trump was visiting, we had families of prisoners demonstrating because the Palestinian Mandela and 1,000 prisoners, the Palestinian Mandela Marwan Barghouti and 1,000 prisoners are on hunger strike for basic rights, and the families are asking us, if even these basic rights, Israel is not ready to deliver them, how are you hoping to achieve peace and freedom for our people? And that's a question we need to be able to answer to.
Nathan, Donald Trump seems to have, he's eased up on the promise that he had made to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He's kind of not necessarily backpedaled per se, but he's certainly not forcing that. And obviously something like that would have really would have upset Palestinians. Do you think that that shows any flexibility?
Yeah, I think that Trump's problem is definitely not flexibility. He has extraordinary flexibility and the ability to reverse himself multiple times. And what we're dealing with is a president and a set of advisors who are extraordinarily ignorant on these issues. You can ask anyone on either side who's talked to them about it. They know very little. Now, some of those people will say that they're intelligent and that they'll learn fast. But right now they know next to nothing, and this is still in a very early phase where they're just trying to figure out the very basics of this. And,
so, Nathan,
and one of the things that he discovered is, that campaign promise.
Let me ask you something about that, because that was one of my questions. Is there anybody in the Trump administration that you all see has the credentials and the experience to take this on? And if President Trump is saying that this is something that means so much to him, isn't it incumbent upon him to put the right people out there to try to even attempt this?
Yes, it is incumbent on him to appoint those kinds of people, and what we can, the best I think what we can hope for is that the two most senior people that he's appointed involved in Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt, will appoint staffs of experts who will have influence and really help bring them up to speed quickly. But I don't think that we can hope for much more than that.
How important is trust between Abbas, Trump, and Benjamin Netanyahu? And I'm going to put this question to you, Yossi. When I talk about trust, one of the controversies that President Trump is dealing with back home are reports in the media that he gave intelligence that was gathered from Israel, that he told this information to the Russians. Now, of course, yesterday, in the front of Prime Minister Netanyahu, Donald Trump said, I never mentioned Israel, which was kind of a backwards way of actually confirming that you did. A long way of me saying, could that potentially be damaging if the Israelis don't feel like they can actually trust Donald Trump?
Well, I don't know exactly what happened there. Maybe very few people do know. What I can tell you is that Israel doesn't have another option. So Trump is there. I must tell you a secret. I would have never voted for him. But apparently Netanyahu would have voted for him had he been an American citizen. He is very happy with him. And he doesn't have an alternative American president right now. So he will have to find his way. They seem very friendly to each other. And I think that Trump did his best in order to be friendly to all his counterparts, including President Abbas and King Salman, about whom he is talking favorably all the time. He was very impressed by the King of Saudi Arabia. So he did his best in order to be nice to the other people, to be friendly to him. And I believe that by that he is building the basis for a plan which hopefully will be offered by the Americans. Trust is important, but it is not playing such a salient role in the international relations as one can believe.
Majed, you seem the least optimistic about anything being different. Have you heard anything that gives you any ray of hope that something might actually be different this time around?
We are the ones who want to believe more than anyone that things will be different, because we are the ones living under military and colonial occupation. We've looked positively at the fact that President Trump was engaged on this matter from day one, that he considered it a priority, that he met with the parties in Washington, that he came to the region, that he saw with his own eyes part of the reality we are living in. These are all important signals. The real question and the real test is the ground. Will he be able to roll back colonialism? Will he be able to end this occupation? And that requires, if you look at the Israeli government today, which is honestly a colonial government, a government that is dedicated to pursuing annexing our land, our homes. If he's not able to block that and reverse these trends, then that will be the fate of every peace initiative we have seen till today. But we were always ready to engage. We are hoping to see peace on this land because we are the ones that are most hurt by the continuation of conflict.
Nathan, we've all been here before, as we reported in the introduction to the three of you. We've all been here before. What's to say that this is not just another series of photo ops and that he will run into, let me put it this way. Do you think the sheer will is there to really give this a try?
It appears that Trump does have the will to start a negotiating process, which is, of course, far from guaranteeing that he can conclude one. But he does appear to have the will to start a process. Whether we should have any optimism at all that he can succeed is a totally different question. And that would be the case really no matter who is president. You asked earlier about optimism. I do think that there is one thing that can make you slightly more optimistic about Trump. You know, if Hillary Clinton had been president, right now, she would be discussing exactly the kind of small interim measures on the ground that Yossi and Majed were both discussing in different ways, and the notion of going for a final status agreement would not be something that she would be pursuing at all. With Trump, what we're seeing is the possibility that he's going to start a process with a deadline of a year or maybe a bit more of trying to actually resolve the conflict wholly. And what we don't know is how he will behave during that and whether he'll really behave differently than previous American presidents. Under any other American president, we could say that the notion of them putting pressure on the parties is zero. With Trump, if there's a 1% chance, that's already 1,000 times greater than anyone else. So I'm not optimistic about the Trump process if and when it starts, but there is that reason for more optimism than with others.
Okay, and I think that that one thing that Yossi said best is he is the president now, so you got to do the best you can with the person who's in office. Gentlemen, thank you all for this discussion. I really, really appreciate it. Yossni Beilin, Majed Bamya, and Nathan Thrall, thank you for joining us. And you can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, that is aljazeera.com. If you want to be part of the discussion as well, go to our Facebook page. That is facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And of course, there is always Twitter. Our Twitter handle is very easy. It's @AJ Inside Story. For me, Richelle, Carey, and the entire team, bye for now.